So some pretty big changes for Split just came through in this 2.01 patch for Valorant. And while there is a guide on Valorant's website itself that talks about everything that changed, I wanted to point out a couple of things that maybe were just kind of listed along with everything else that I think could actually really impact how this game is played at higher levels. And the first thing I want to talk about is over by A Heaven, where this cubby has basically been completely removed. In its place is like this more narrow wall, which I don't really think is going to be safe at all for for defenders to be playing, because a lot of times previously in matches you would see, imagine there's a wall here, but you would see someone basically just hold the line like this, and then he was able to back up to Heaven in case. Now, I mean, really, that opportunity is not there. This narrowed wall, it's a pretty bad angle if you're peeking almost anywhere. For instance, in this nook right here, if you were to try to play like this angle or something, it's not going to work. Even if you were to tuck yourself in the corner entirely, if you were to try to go for like a cheesy play like this, your arm would still be sticking out. Um, and that completely changes how the defenders are going to be playing Heaven. Now their best option is going to be more passive towards CT. Something like this, I think, will become even more common than it already is. I could see maybe the potential of someone trying to cheese a kill by sitting on this angle and then peeking out wide, because you actually don't expose yourself from here if you get right on the corner. But I mean, Heaven's going to be a lot harder to hold over towards A. Also, something towards Rafters could be a lot more uh, commonplace as well. Trying to more so play maybe like this. But that comes with its whole other set of issues where you're basically consistently going to need a smoke over towards A main. Otherwise, you're just going to be completely bodied. So Heaven will change up entirely, and I don't really have a solution for how the defenders will be playing this, but I can imagine they're going to be seeing a lot more of an emphasis for attackers to take Heaven. And one thing that actually comes with taking Heaven is now being able to clear this part of the A site a little bit quicker and a little bit more easy. Before, this wall was a little bit more wide, and you're able to kind of tuck yourself in this corner and not be exposed to Heaven whatsoever. It's still pretty good, but thing is, now defenders or attackers even, if they play post plant, they can see into this corner and still kind of shoot you. They don't have to commit nearly as much, and more importantly, they don't have to expose themselves to a main elbow or even some players who are playing more aggressive in hell. So I think this is another thing that might completely change up how, in particular, clutches are going to be played out, because this spot wasn't exactly used for an anchor. If you're anchoring onto the B bomb site or onto the A bomb site, you're not going to see someone just sit here for the entire round, most likely. Usually be something akin to back of site or elbow or even all the way back here in screens, but not so much over in that corner of the site. However, that is definitely a little bit more prominent when it comes to clutches, when it comes to trying to isolate angles. It's not too uncommon to see clutches back here try to really force an engagement over towards screens. So those are the two big changes that I want to point out over towards A. Moving on towards B, I think there's a couple of opportunities for outplays onto the site itself. Moving over towards B main, first thing that I want to mention is that there is now this set of trash, and it is so lovingly called, that you can now get on top of this first tall box with, and it becomes much more viable for basically everybody. Because if you think about it before, you would have to set up a boost with one of your teammates, which, let's be honest here, it's probably not going to be the easiest thing in the world to do. And even at higher levels of play, you didn't see that come through just because it would be a little bit of a waste of time. Or if they couldn't get a boost together, they would have to set up or maybe use like an ability to get up here. Now it's a lot more accessible. So while I don't think it's going to be necessarily game changing, I wouldn't say it's all too unexpected, maybe on save rounds, something of the sort, to see maybe a double stack with one player sitting here, one player on top, and just trying to eke out an early frag and then maybe, smoke it off and then try to escape towards site. Um, Another thing that could be somewhat interesting is maybe putting a Killjoy turret right here, waiting to play contact off of that, and then peeking out from this little elevated angle, or just straight up, playing behind the box itself or behind this pile of trash or in front of it. All of these are small little off angles, which I think provide a lot of opportunities for mix-ups or different ways to engage over towards B main. And I'm not 100% sure if that's going to actually conclude into anything big, but I think it's way more major than the other change, with this box, because this isn't really going to be an angle that you're going to be holding. It's so easily clearable. And the last change I want to go over is this double set of boxes that was added towards the B-bomb site. While I was doing a little bit of testing on this, and it's actually kind of interesting. If you stay towards this pillar and then move just like one step back towards around this area, you have a pretty wonderful headshot angle on almost anyone coming through heaven. And if there is someone in heaven who does try to look out for this, if they have a really good shot, they might be able to pick away at you. But theoretically, this is a great way to try to, again, throw in a bit of a mix up here. If you were to fall back by the pillar, you could just try to spot for one person over towards heaven, and then you can simply just, step forward, step back towards the pillar, and it becomes a much more safer engagement. So I think you'll be seeing a lot more players, play maybe a bit more aggressive towards heaven, whether it's on post plants or even just anchoring down a site if there's like very little B main control, something of the sort. But those are the big changes I wanted to point out. It's just, I think in particular, the B bomb site has gotten a ton more interesting, and A heaven is completely in limbo. I'm not exactly sure where the defenders are going to be playing other than completely conceding heaven itself, because their options become a lot more limited. There are a bunch of other changes that came through. In particular, there was one towards CT, for instance, where this cubby is no longer here. You can't really try to cheese out a kill by hiding basically where this is now. It's just part of the dirt. But I don't think this is necessarily round changing in the same way, because you aren't seeing this used as a very common position even when saving. A lot of players would rather just back up to a more safe location or just straight up not play here. I mean, I just don't think it's that that groundbreaking, but I think it is a nice way just to kind of reduce the number of angles that someone has to peek. So overall, I'm a really big fan of the changes that were made to Split, but I think the ones that I pointed out right there are going to be the big difference maker. And hey, keep an eye out if you're looking at more pro games, or not even pro games, semi-pro games in the future. That just about does it for me. If you enjoyed this video, I would do appreciate a like or subscribe, but not necessary. Have a good night.